And welcome, Mindsetters, to this session of Learn Extra Live doing grade 12 life science. I hope you guys are ready. You've got your pens and pads out and you're ready to make notes. I've got Aslam here. He was going to be doing today's show. So, what are you doing today?
So we're doing environment stuff and we're talking about community ecology.
Okay, no problem.
Interesting stuff.
All right, awesome. So while Aslam makes his way across the board, Mindsetters, as I always say, make sure you get chatting to me on the Facebook page. Talk to me. I can't help you if you don't help me by telling me what's wrong. So on that note, Mindsetters, I cannot stress enough. Chat to me. Let me know what's wrong, if you're lost, and if you need help. But make sure you have your pens and pads out and you're making notes. And remember the page, www.facebook.com/learnextra. But on that note, this is where I hand over to Aslam. Aslam, take it away.
Thank you, Ty. Welcome, guys, and let's get cracking into the section. Just remember that this section on environment, this is one part of it, but the section on environment is 40% of paper 2. So you need to make sure that you know this work well so that you can score. Also, I must add that this section is fairly the easiest of all the topics that you have, and therefore you should not waste time when doing this type of work in terms of getting as much marks as possible. So stay with me, keep those questions rolling, whatever is bothering you, send it through, let's deal with that today. Just to give you a quick overview of what we are looking at, and if you look at the screen there, we're looking at community ecology. Now, what was important today, my very good friend Hamida Musa, we were sitting together, and as I was sending one last slide through for the show, she told me that learners always make a mistake in terms of confusing these 4 headings. The 4 main headings in community ecology are social organization, community structure, human influence, and community change. Now, the 2 that are confused are these 2 here. This one here and that one there. Social organization and community structure. So please, guys, listen carefully as we're going to go through the slides so that you know exactly where we are and where we're going to. In terms of social organization, we look at herds and flocks. We'll need to change the color there. Herds and flocks. And guys, when we're talking of herds and flocks, we'll look at an example just now maybe. We're looking at herds and flocks where it is a protective mechanism. And herds and flocks are generally, is generally a way in which the prey, those that are being hunted, protect themselves against the predator. The next one is hunting in packs. These 2 also, learners confuse the 2. They confuse the hunting in packs with herds and flocks. They are not the same. Like I said, herds and flocks, mainly the prey will use it. Hunting in packs, obviously hunting in packs, the hunters will practice that. In other words, the predators. We'll talk about when we look at the example just now. Then we have breeding hierarchies. Breeding hierarchies means that in a particular population, there would be only one or a select few pairs that will be able to mate. The others will not mate in that time until the dominant pair wanes out or they are outcompeted and they move out of the population. And then the next pair will take over from there. The last one is division of labor. Division of labor, something we should all be doing in our houses, where everybody has something to do. Division, divide of labor, the work. So division of labor is something that nature itself shows us. Ants, bees, different types of insects, different types of organisms, they have different functions within a colony or within a population. So each particular organism has a role to play. And in that way, the work becomes light. Many hands make work light. Okay? Next one is community structure. Now look how this one differs from this one here. Here we are talking about how the population is organized to make them survive or to make them proceed without harm. Community structure is what is happening within that community. And under that, we have three main headings, and they are predation or predator-prey relationship, competition, and symbiosis. Predation is very straightforward. Predation is a process where one organism, the predator, hunts, kills, and eats the prey. So it must hunt, it must kill, and it must be for food. The prey must be there for food. Then we consider that a predator-prey relationship, or in one word, predation. Competition, there are a few two important ones first. These two here on top. Interspecific and intraspecific. Now, you all are at school, or were at school at some time, and you would have inter-class debates, or inter-school debates, or inter-school sport, between two different classes, inter-class, inter-school between two different schools. So, interspecific, between two different species. So, interspecific competition would be between two different species. And intra, if you remember your grade 10 work, you would have spoken about intracellular digestion. And in the grade 11 work also, when you're looking at the digestive system, you talk about intracellular digestion. That would mean inside the cell. Inside, in this case, intraspecific. So, within the same species. That would be intraspecific competition. Next up there would be, I just want to extend the page a little bit so we go a bit higher. Good. Resource partitioning. And we're going to look at the question dealing with resource partitioning a little later. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. The question itself will explain this concept. Sometimes it's better to deal with a question, and as the answers of those questions unfold, the topic itself presents itself to you, instead of learning chunks of text and then trying to answer it later. Sometimes it's another angle of going into something like this. And because these are fairly common sense ideas, it would be easier to look at it by means of questions. The last one there, competitive exclusion. The word exclusion is the key there, where there would be one winner and one loser. So one of the organisms would win, and therefore they would have the resource that's there. In symbiosis, there are three, and guys, when we're talking about symbiosis, this is something that hasn't started today in grade 12 for you. Symbiosis, you have been introduced to this concept in grade 3 or 4 already in your natural science classes, NS classes. So this is not something new. Again, and whether you did it in grade 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, these terminology do not change. Mutualism will still be mutualism. It can't change. Right, Ty?
Well, if you say so. No, that is true.
It can't change the concept. Yes, sometimes, guys, you may learn more intricate examples, and you may go into more detail with some of the concepts that you learn. For example, even in grade 9, you learned about the ear. You learned about the ear again in grade 12. But in grade 12, you learn much more about the ear than you did in grade 9. But these concepts, you can't learn more about it. This is the concept. It has a definition. You need to know an example. And if they give you an example, you must be able to say whether it's one of these three. That's as simple as that. Mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. Those are the three that we have to look at there. Go back a little bit up. The human influence is how you and I influence this environment or the communities in which we live. How do we make a difference in this? And sadly to say, most of our influence is negative. Most of our influence is negative. In other words, it goes against nature, and it has a destructive force in the environment itself. Lastly, community change, and there we look at two important concepts: primary succession and secondary succession. Again, that would be discussed a little later as we go along. But that, guys, on this page, on the screen rather, is what you need to know. If you can tick along all these things, you are ready for this portion of environment. Remember, the other portion of environment is population studies, population dynamics, and human populations. So you need to learn that as well, and a little bit about our ecological footprint and how it has an impact on the environment. That you can link to this as well. But remember, they are two separate issues. Going straight into the first part, and the first part, just to remind you, I'm going to go back all the time if I can, and the first part is social organization. And when we're looking at that, there we have it there. Ignore that part on the top there, symbiosis. Here we're looking at, we said hunting in packs. Here's the first one. A pack of wolves, when they hunt in packs, what's the advantages? Is this rocket science? Obviously not, guys. Sorry? Rocket science?
Nope.
No, not at all. This is simple common sense. It's obviously better to hunt in packs because the chances of catching the prey are greater. You corner the prey, you get them in a corner, you get one, and the pack shares the resource. The resource here being whatever they're going to catch and kill. Okay? So that's what happens there. Hunting in packs is an advantage for those organisms. In this particular example, we can actually talk about two separate issues here. Here we have the wildebeest on this side here, which are flocks or herds. So they together. The example you'll see in your textbook is that of zebras. And the zebras is a special case because of the stripy appearance of the zebras. And when they get together, it makes it difficult for the predator to follow them because they create these waves in the eyes of the predator. And because of this, the predator gets a bit hazy, and therefore they can get away if they can. So when we're looking at that, that's what's happening there. But at the same time, by having this lion in this picture, we're also showing, and this is not part of what we're doing now, this is about social structure, which we'll talk about later. This one, we can talk about predator-prey. Between the lion and the wildebeest is predator-prey or predation. But within this here itself is an example of herds or flocks. And even fish do that. Fish move in big schools. And look at this one here. Well, coincidentally, the fish that I chose are striped. So when bigger fish are chasing these, they will also get confused with the stripes. Same idea. So this is what we are saying. The idea is, I mean, guys, you know, even as human beings, if you were a member of a gang, you would move with your gang members. You won't move alone. Because if you move alone, then the other opponents, you shouldn't be part of a gang, by the way. You should be with friends and buddies, not gangs.
Maybe a dance crew.
Or dance crew also. They'll move together all the time because they share the same ideas. They share the same interests, so they'll move together. So in that way, when they move together from gig to gig also, they have a degree of protection wherever they go. So the same way, this is what we are trying to say here about these animals. And those that want to do other things, even a soccer team for that matter, would travel together in that way. Okay, here we're looking at the different social structures. Here, well, here we have the bees in a colony. We're going to look at this particular one. We're going to zoom into that one there. The bees in a colony here. And bees have, over and above what we've been talking about here, they have what we call the division of labor. The division of labor is predominant in the bees. The bees have a system of hierarchy in terms of their labor and where they are in the social structure. For example, you have the queen bee, who is, well, the queen, obviously, and she's the main part of the hive. Her job is to get fertilized and to lay eggs all the time. Beneath her, you have the worker bees or the drones, and their job is to feed the eggs and the hatchlings and so on. And then you have the males. Their job is to fertilize the female. That's all they have to do. We'll talk about bees when we have a question on them a little later. We move on now to symbiosis. And that again, I'm going to go back to that other one. Remember, I said I'll keep going back. There we go. When we're talking about community structure, we're talking about symbiosis is one example. We will look at these other two, predation and competition, in questions. So they will unfold as we go through the questions. So symbiosis, sym meaning together, and bio meaning life or living. So symbiosis means to live together, have a relationship with each other. And we're not talking about the relationship you're thinking about. We mentioned earlier that we have three. The first of those three is known as mutualism. And guys, this is the language thing. By now, you should know. And when we say this deal is of mutual benefit to us, that means it will benefit you and it will benefit me. So mutualism is when both species benefit. Both the species will benefit. They will live together in such a way that they have a relationship that both organisms will benefit. Look at this particular example here. This little bird is living closely with the crocodile. It does a toothpick job for the crocodile. In other words, it gets rid of all the debris between the teeth, and at the same time, the bird gets food, number one. The crocodile is getting a free dental checkup, if you want to call it that. Please don't write that in the exam. It's not a dental checkup, okay? The crocodile is getting rid of all the debris between the teeth, and at the same time, the bird also gets an added protection in terms of protection as well. The next one is commensalism. And here, one species benefits, the other is unaffected. In other words, the other species is neither harmed nor it benefits. And the last one, before we go for our break, and we'll come back with examples, is parasitism. In parasitism, one organism benefits and the other is harmed. So you can see the three tiers of this. Mutualism, both benefit. Parasitism, the other end of the continuum, one benefits, one is harmed. And commensalism, one benefits, the other neither benefits nor is harmed. Ty.
All right. So on that note, mindset is make sure you do not disappear. Make sure that you get your pens and pads out and you're ready for the next segment. So go do whatever you have to do. If you have to go to the bathroom, if you have to go get some drink, whatever you have to do, but make sure you come back. See you after this break. And welcome back, Mindsetters. Hope you had a great little break there. And you went and did whatever you had to do. You went to the bathroom. You went to got to something to drink. You answered the phone. Whatever you had to do. Now you need to pay attention and focus. You need to get your pens and pads out and make sure that you guys are making notes. On that note, this is where I hand over to Mr. Aslam. Aslam, continue.
I like the way you pun on notes there. Guys, welcome back. I'm hoping you're refreshed and ready to roll again. We were busy with, before the break, mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Now we're going into a little bit more of the examples. Again, to remind us, in mutualism, both organisms benefit. So mutualism, if we have to define it, is a symbiotic relationship between two organisms where both benefit. Key words, both and benefit. Okay? And let's look at an example. A beautiful example is from your grade 11 work, lichens. Lichens are actually two organisms in one. They are made up of algae and fungi. Now, if you remember your grade 11 works, you'll know that fungi have no chlorophyll. Therefore, obviously, they cannot manufacture their own food. Algae, on the other hand, generally, if they're green algae, they would have chlorophyll. They will have chlorophyll. And if they do have chlorophyll, they can manufacture their own food. So the algae makes the food. Now, what are we doing now? One was we said we explained what mutualism is. Now we are giving an example. So we're saying lichens is an example of mutualism, because in this case, you don't have to say, well, you'll have to explain that in lichens, there's a mutualistic relationship between algae and fungus. Because there should be two organisms for this relationship. One organism on its own cannot have a relationship. So we're talking about algae and fungi having a relation together, mutualistic relationship. Now what we are doing, we're going one step further. We're explaining how they benefit each other. The algae makes food, but it needs some way to keep moist. So the fungus forms a crust around the algae, which keeps the moisture in. And in this way, both organisms benefit. The algae is getting protection and cover, so it remains moist. And the fungus, on the other hand, will get food from the algae. So both organisms benefit. And here's an example of the lichen. By the way, if you remember, you did this last year in grade 11, and the lichens you'll see either on rocks, you'll see lichens on trees, on the barks of trees, etc. Different types of lichens, foliose, lichens, crustose, lichens. You do not have to know that. For this section, we are just merely giving an example. By the way, guys, remember there are many more examples of mutualism out there. We are just selecting a few to show you. And I've chosen this one because it's not so much mentioned in the textbooks, so it's something different. Add to your bank. Another one there is the cleaner fish and the moray eel. These cleaner fish here and the moray eel. There's a diagram. And what did it do? Obviously, it eats the parasites and food bits out, very much like what we said about the bird and the crocodile earlier. On the inside of this moray eel, it gets its meal, and it is protected from the predators by the fierce eel. Obviously, you know, I'm moving with this big guy. Nobody's going to come and mess with me. So I'm getting protection, and I'm getting food. And meanwhile, the big guy is getting a cleanup. And the cleaner fish also gets rid of parasites that are in this fish. So they're both benefiting. Simple. Next one is on commensalism. One species benefits while the other is unaffected. Now, here, unaffected with an A there, right? Okay. Here, what happens is, here there's big debate. Some people say that the benefit here is more leaning towards the birds, the egret birds here, so therefore it's commensalism. Other authors argue that they both benefit, so it's mutualistic. Now, my own example, and please guys, you cannot use this in an exam. I want to buy a house. And when I want to buy this house, I go to my good friend Tai, who, as you can see, has got a lot of money. And Tai says, okay, I would give you a loan of 200 or 300. I don't know if you can get a house at 200,000-300,000 these days. But anyway, he loans me the money. And he says, listen, you pay me as you can. Okay? And I want exactly whatever I'm lending you, I want the same money back. As opposed to me going to the bank and taking a loan on the bank and paying 6 or 7%, 8% interest to the bank. Now, when I pay back the loan to Tai hasn't benefited in any way. And if I pay him back, obviously, he wouldn't lose anything either. Meanwhile, I would have benefited because I got an interest-free loan. That is what commensalism is about. It's not an example of commensalism. It's just an explanation to make you understand what we mean by when we say commensalism, okay? But if I don't pay Tai, don't tell him this, but if I don't pay him, the whole relationship changes. It's no more commensalism because he is losing. I benefit. And then you become, what relationship is that then? Parasitism. I would be the parasite, and he would be the host. He would be losing. He's harmed. I'm benefiting. Okay?
Yes, and I would be extremely, extremely angry.
And if he gets hold of me, then it may be predator prey. If he eats me after he kills me. Okay. All right. Okay. So the cattle, egret, and the cows. The cattle help the egret who look for grasshoppers and beetles that are raised by the cows. As the cow is moving, the grasshoppers, etc., start moving. So the egrets pick them up and they eat them up. Now and then they get a free ride on the cow. They sit on the back. So they got a taxi for free, looking for ticks and flies. So when that happens, when they're looking for ticks and flies, obviously now it's a bit of an issue. If they do not sit and have the ticks and flies, up to that point there, it's commensalistic. But if they move on and they take away the ticks and flies away from the cow, then it becomes mutualistic. Can you see that a relationship can change in this one thing as well, in one example? Another example is the barnacles and the whales. The barnacles need a place to anchor. Therefore, as you can see on the whale's body, they have plenty. They must wait for food to come their way. They hitch a ride on a whale who delivers them to a food source. They take him somewhere else, drops them off there. The whale is not benefiting, is not harmed in any way, drops it there. The whale is not affected. The barnacles are winning all the way. So commensalistic relationship. And parasitism. One species benefits while the other is harmed. Symbiotic relationship between two organisms where one organism benefits and the other one is harmed. Okay, that's simple. And here we talk of the mistletoe, which is an aerial parasite. It climbs onto a tree and it does not have any roots of its own, and it cannot manufacture its own food as such, so therefore it lives off the tree that it attaches itself to, in this case here. Without that tree, it would die. And while it lives off this tree, it slowly chokes out the life of the host. In other words, it draws the water all the time, and the tree that it is hitched onto would die. So therefore, that tree is harmed, and the mistletoe is benefiting, so parasitism.
Wow, that changes Christmas for me in many ways.
There you go. Under the mistletoe, eh?
Yep.
This one's here, we all may have encountered some time or the other bed bugs. These are small, nocturnal parasites. Nocturnal, by the way, some environment ecology, nocturnal, they are active at night. Like many of you who are more active at night than during the day. And they are parasites. We know what a parasite is on unsuspecting humans like you and I, all of us. They feed exclusively on blood. That is what they want. They want blood. Their bites often result in allergic reactions. Obviously, we get harmed in some way or the other. You're going to get pimples and bumps all over your body. It will be itchy and scratchy, and if you're going to scratch too much, you're going to infect the area, and so on and so on. Obviously, you need to get rid of the bugs. And the famous sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite. There you go. That's where it came from. They are parasites. Tapeworms, grade 11, you've learnt about tapeworms, grade 10 and 11. Again, this is a cucumber, a tapeworm. The host is a dog or a cat, or we can talk of the Tinasolium, which you have probably learnt about. That is, the hosts are pig and man. So it's found in pork and in man. So you've got two hosts, a primary host and a secondary host. Man is an intermediate host. It just goes through and goes back to the pig, and then it stays there and it moves on in that direction. Okay, so that's what we are saying there. Make sure that if you have pets at home, and in this case you have dogs or cats, you make sure that you clean them regularly and you take them to the vet regularly so that you're seeing that they do not have these things, because they can transfer it to you. The same goes when you are eating pork. Make sure that you are not eating pork that has not been certified healthy by health inspectors in the abattoirs, etc. And if you do, Perhaps living on a farm, you just slaughter your own, and you're having your own pork there at home, or you're having. Make sure that you cook your meat well. Above 40 degrees, you shouldn't have a problem. Okay, that then brings us to the end of the symbiosis. I'm going to skip this last bit here, and I'm going to come back to it, because we need to check our learning. All right, let's start with this one. The question is very simple. It says, classify the following symbiotic relationships under mutualism, commensalism, or parasitism. In our national exams and in our provincial exams, we rarely get questions like this, so long with this type of thing. This is just so that we want to, this is more an exercise than an exam question. In an exam, they could give you diagrams of examples and ask you to name them and explain the relationship between them. Or they could just give you, say, differentiate between commensalism and mutualism, or commensalism and parasitism, or any one of them with examples. 3 marks each, you get about 9 marks for all of that. Here we're only asking you to identify in this particular case. They say E. coli bacteria in the human large intestine produce vitamin K. The large intestine provides a place to live and nourishment for the bacteria. What do the E. coli do? They produce vitamin K for the human. What does the human do? It provides shelter and nourishment for the bacteria. Win, win. Both benefit, so mutualism. Simple. A person is infected with tapeworm from eating raw pork. The tapeworm absorbs nutrients from the small intestine, and the person becomes sick. Notice how I'm underlining the key words, guys. That's important. So the person becomes sick. In other words, he is being harmed. And the tapeworm is benefiting because it's getting a free ride, free shelter, no rent, no telephone bills, no digestion, free chow, doesn't have to go and buy chow. So in that way, one is benefiting, the other one is harmed. You got it right, parasitism. Rhizobia bacteria living in association with plant roots turn nitrogen from the air into compounds, and if you know your nitrogen cycle, it will convert nitrogen to nitrates. The benefit to the bacteria is unclear. In most cases, they would say that the bacteria gets food from the plant. It's not unclear, really. The bacteria get food from the plant. And in that way, obviously, both benefit. So this is mutualism. Rhizobia is one example. The other one is nodular bacteria. They live in the roots especially. Okay? The yucca moth lays eggs in the ovary of a yucca flower. At the same time, the moth pollinates the flower. Flower benefiting, getting pollinated. Yucca getting eggs protected. So obviously mutualism. One type of algae lives inside reef-building coral. The algae causes the coral to grow faster, and the coral provides nutrients that the algae can use, both benefiting. Mutualism. Small plants called epiphytes grow on the branches of rainforest trees without harming them. Harming the trees. Up in the branches, the epiphytes can get enough light and water and nutrients from the tree. The tree gets no benefit from the epiphytes, so neither harmed nor benefiting. Commensalism. Lichens are made up of algae and fungi living together. Okay, this one we don't have to do, guys, because we've done it already. Mutualism. Crown gall disease weakens plants and slows their growth. The bacterium that causes the infection obtains nutrients from the plants. Obviously, gall disease weakens, harm. Gets nutrients from the plants, benefit. So, parasitism. Guys, if you can understand this part here, then you've understood the concepts that we have discussed up to now about this section. Mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, and those three, obviously. Okay? We're moving on with questions because we're going to go back to some of the one section I'm leaving for towards the end. This one here is very clear. There's a whole passage, and the passage is talking about an impala population, and there were so many in so much time and so on. I'm not reading the whole passage. It's there. We're going straight to the questions in this case here. It's because sometimes we can glean information. I'll go back there, but you don't do that. You read the passage first, and then you answer the questions. Differentiate between intra-specific and inter-specific competition. You didn't need the passage for that, obviously. Intra-specific, competition between or within the same species. And inter, different species. Okay, prey and predator. The prey is the organism that is being hunted and killed for food. And the predator is the one that hunts and kills another for food. And with that, over to Ty.
All right. So on that note, Mindsetters, I hope you're enjoying yourselves as much as we are. Make sure that you guys are making notes and do not disappear, because we'll be right back after this break. And welcome back, Mindsetters. Hope you had a nice little break. Did whatever you had to do. You went to the bathroom, or you went onto the phone, or your mom was all calling you for something. Now you need to make sure that you're paying attention and you're ready. And if you're like Ashworth and you're just loving the show, thanks for letting us know. Make sure you post on the page. But, by the way, Mr. Aslam, we had a question come in here from Sibusiso. She wanted to find out, well, he wanted to find out, I can't tell because I think he's in the picture with his girlfriend. Not sure. But anyway, how does fungi and athlete's foot relate?
Fungi and athlete's foot.
Yeah.
Great question, Sibusiso. Great question.
Siboniso.
Siboniso, good question. What is athlete's feet? Firstly, somebody like Castor Semenya that can run very fast got athlete's feet.
Not quite.
Not quite. No, guys, that's not what athlete's feet is. If you have athlete's feet, you're not going to run any faster. You'll scratch a lot more, you'll itch a little more, yes, but not running any faster. Athlete's foot is when fungi grow in areas between your toes especially. By the way, that fungal infection can actually spread throughout the body. If not treated properly, it can actually, I've seen people with the fungal growth on their hands and the rest on the body as such.
Wow.
I've seen that happen. So what happens here is, first of all, now you've got to go back to your grade 11. Learn about fungus a little bit. Characteristics of fungus. What do they like, fungus? They like damp, dark, moist areas. Because you see, fungus don't have chlorophyll, so they don't need light. And they need moisture and a warm temperature to make it favorable for them. And as long as that temperature is favorable and the rest of it is favorable, they reproduce. And where's our bad habit coming from? We wash our feet, we don't wipe them, we put the socks straight over. So we've already created a warm, moist, dark environment. So what happens, the fungus, if they're in the air, the spores of the fungus are in the air, they would start infecting you on your toes. And because they are causing harm to you, they're getting food, etc. from you. So what relation is this?
Parasitic.
Parasitism again. So even fungi on your feet or athlete's foot itself is an example of parasitism. Way to cure that, obviously there are creams and sprays and powder, etc. But more importantly than that, make sure that your feet are kept dry as far as possible, that after you shower, etc., you make sure you give yourself enough time for your feet to dry up properly before you wear your socks. And if you have athlete's feet, best to do is to stay without socks for a while. Obviously, you can't go to work with sandals and things like that. But when you're at home, try to keep barefoot or with sandals so that you are not covering the area. Expose them to sunlight, unfavorable conditions, and in that way you kill them. Okay, but you have medication as well for it. So athlete's foot, fungus infects humans, and this is an example of parasitism. Another example of parasitism. Good. That takes us now to the questions again. We're still with the same passage, very big passage, but you would have had to read it. The question now says, by referring to the passage, give the names of organisms involved in intraspecific. We've already explained what intraspecific competition was just before this, within the same species. Can we say here that the lions and cheetahs and impalas was intraspecific competition? No. But we can say that there was intraspecific competition among the lions themselves or among the cheetahs themselves. But in this passage, there's no real evidence that the lions were competing, because they do not talk about the populations of the lions, they do not talk about the population of the cheetahs. But they do talk about the impala population that was at 8,000, and then it went up high, and then it went down to 4,000, and it was going down further. And here we have only 20,000 impalas, the carrying capacity of that. So obviously, among the impala, there was intra-specific competition. That's the main one. However, if we argue, we could say that obviously among the lions, if they competed among themselves, there was also, and among the cheetahs as well, even among the plants, the vegetation in this case. But they're not telling you what vegetation, so you can't really talk, because it must be of the same species, not just vegetation itself. So the most correct answer would be impala here, because you can see this competition, because the population was at a certain level and is dwindling. Our next question is interspecific competition. And obviously that's easy, because we're having lions and cheetahs. They will both compete for the impala. They both want to eat the impala. So that's between two different species. They are competing to eat the impala. So the lions and the cheetahs would be that answer there, lions and cheetahs. Now you must be careful here. We're talking about between the lions and the cheetahs. Not among the lions themselves and the cheetahs on their own, not separately. But the two together are competing for one resource, that is interspecific competition. Moving on with this one here. Why did the impala population continue to decline after 80% had died during the winter? This question here, now you need a little bit of population dynamic background. Obviously, you can see what's happening here. First of all, that there were 80,000 of them, and when there were 80,000, they ate lots of the grass and what have you, the trees, etc. They ate it up. So if there was so much of food available, and this 80,000 ate so much of food up, then obviously the amount of food available now is less. So the carrying capacity of this environment has decreased. That is why, that means at that level, at 80, after the 80%, they were still higher than the carrying capacity. Therefore, it had to come below the carrying capacity. And we'll go more into carrying capacity and the rest of it a little later, or in other lessons. We're going to ask what is carrying capacity, so let's explain it now first of all. Carrying capacity is the maximum number of individuals that a particular habitat can sustain. And it's not a blanket thing, it's talking of a species. In other words, how many impalas in this case here? What is the carrying capacity of this environment for impala? What is the carrying capacity of this environment for grass, for buck, for whatever? So that's what carrying capacity means. In a classroom situation, let's say, for example, you have 30 desks in a classroom and chairs. Then obviously the carrying capacity of that classroom, that environment, if that was an environment out there, it was an ecosystem, would be 30. Any one more coming there would be bad because it's already full. If anybody leaves, it's not too bad because it's full, so it's not going to get too empty. On the other hand, if the class was only 5, and if some had to leave, it's bad because now this class is going to be like almost empty, or the teacher is going to have one child to teach. No good. So we'll talk about carrying capacity and the rest when you look at population ecology as well. And population, and this is nothing new, we've spoken about population in evolution, so let's talk about it again. Population is a group of organisms of the same species occupying a specific habitat at a specific time, and they must be able to interbreed. Now, I sometimes feel that this interbreed here should not be mentioned, but in exams you have to put it there, because when you say species, what is the definition of a species? It's a group of organisms that have similar characteristics that can interbreed. So obviously when we say they're of the same species, they must be able to interbreed. But you add it there. Okay? And this one here deals with predator-prey. So remember I told you, as we go forward, we'll get the other issues that we haven't covered in the content itself. So let's look at this one here. It's telling you relationship between population of jackals and rabbits. By now you should know that the rabbit is the prey and the jackal is the predator. You are at that age where you should know that. Population size, look at the graph again. It has a heading with 2 variables, the population of the jackals and the population of the rabbits. Over time, actually, it should say over time. And here they give you the years. It's got a heading. It's got frequencies there. Here you've got frequencies here. You notice the intervals, 100, 200, 300, 400. I'm just pointing this out because you need to know this when you're drawing graphs. Okay, so you can see what's happening here. There's the rabbit population there, the solid line there. And here, this one here with the circles is the jackals. You'll notice in this particular graph that the population of the jackals are generally, on average, lower than that of the rabbits. This is important. There must always be more food than there are organisms eating the food. So in a graph, in another graph, if they do not tell you which one is a rabbit, which one is a jackal, which is a predator, which is a prey, this is the first thing you look at. Number one, overall, on average, which one has a bigger population? Which one reaches a higher peak? That will be the prey. The one that reaches the lower peak would be the predator. The second thing you must look at in a graph, which one increases first? And if you look at this one here, you'll see that when this one increases, when that is increasing, then that starts increasing slowly, as you can see there. It starts increasing. The minute this one starts increasing, what happens to this one? It starts decreasing. Starts coming down. Why? Because the predators are getting more and they're going to eat more of the prey. So this is called predation pressure. The predation pressure increases and therefore they eat more of the prey and therefore the prey population starts decreasing. Now what does this mean? Logic. Less food for the predators. If there's less food for the predators, they must either move to another environment or stay there and die. So what happens to them? As the predator-prey population comes down, then you'll see a little bit later, the predator population starts coming down again. And as that comes down, the prey population starts increasing. Why? Because the pressure on the prey has decreased. There's less organisms eating them. So predation pressure has decreasing. We say that the predator and prey relationship is an oscillating like waves. When one goes up, then the other one also goes up. When one goes down, the other one also comes down, and so on. It's an oscillating relationship. And at the same time, it's nature's way of keeping check both population, that we don't have too much of prey and we don't have too much of predator. Both of these regulate each other. Important to note that. Here they want to know, first of all, what interaction, obviously this is a multiple choice, but I've discussed it, it's predation. The next one says, what effect does a decrease in the number of jackals have on the rabbit population? Jackals are the predator. If we decrease the jackals, what's going to happen to the rabbit population? Do they decrease? No. Is eliminated from the habitat after a long period of time? No. Rabbit population increases, maybe. Both the rabbit population and the jackal are eliminated from the habitat? No. So obviously our correct answer is C. Another way to see how we can eliminate and get to the right answer. We could ask, this question couldn't not only be a multiple choice, we can ask many other questions here. What would happen if this happens to that one, and so on, and so on, and so on. What is the population of the rabbits at this particular year? You go up there, you look at it there, you go across, you read it off the graph, you give a figure. So those are the type of questions that we can get here. And I think we have one last question here that we can look at today. And this is also dealing with our second part of community structures, and that is this story about competition. First of all, competition is when organisms compete or fight for limited resources. Interspecific, we've spoken about, intraspecific. Now let's look at this one here. They say, look at these diagrams, A, B, and C. They want to know what is each one of this. They go back, they say, name the following, the community interaction represented in A, and I want to look at this one especially. Look at this one here. Many learners, this came from last year's paper, by the way. Many learners, the minute they saw a giraffe, they say lemak. This has got nothing to do with evolution, guys. This is environment. Now, here what you are seeing, you're seeing a tall organism, a slightly shorter organism, and an even shorter organisms. And what's happening is they have different eating areas. And because they have different eating areas, they can coexist. And this is known as a resource partitioning. And what this means actually is that different organisms can coexist in the same environment as long as they have different niches. The niches is the living space of that organism where it feeds. So look at a giraffe. It's eating on the leaves. So these guys don't bother it. And this guy is eating here in the middle. This guy here doesn't bother him. So they do not compete with each other. They can live together. You know, if you take a brother and a sister in the house, maybe they can coexist. But put two sisters in the same room, all hell breaks loose, right? Because they have the same requirements. The brother and the sister may have different requirements. Same thing happening. These have different requirements, and therefore they can coexist in this environment. This one here, you can see they're fighting for something. This is intra-specific competition. It's the same species, intra-specific competition. And guys, that's all we have time for today. I hand over to Ty.
Okay, so on that note, thank you so much, Mr. Aslam. That was a lot of information, but a lot of awesome information. And if you guys had just as much fun as we did, make sure that you post. Just say thank you. We enjoyed the show. And Mindsetters, I cannot stress enough, always just feel free to talk on the page, talk to each other, let each other know where you guys are at. And again, if you do not post, whether you're lost somewhere, if you need help, we can't help you. So make sure if you're lost anywhere, make sure you post and talk to us. But on that note, this is where me as Ty, I say cheers, and we'll see you next time.